YOLO numerologists and historians, I want to talk to you guys about the number 0 or the symbol 0. Now, we were taught in school that the Romans, for example, the Greeks and Romans did not have the number 0. If you're familiar with Roman numerals, they don't have a 0, you know? And the question I'm asking and answering is, if they didn't have this number 0, how were they able to build the incredible, amazing structures and things they built, which means they knew geometry, which means they knew math, and yet they didn't have a 0? And the answer I'm providing to that is that we've kind of been lied to. We've kind of been misled, right? So our number system gets in the way of us visualizing and thinking the way the Romans did, for example. And what do I mean by that? So in our number system, we have the number and symbol 0. But we also use that number in other numbers, like number 10, number 100, number 1000. Now, if you were to remove 0 from the number 10, 100, 1000, and so on, and designate a symbol unique for 10, just like 9 is a 9, a 8 is a 8, 7 is a 7, a 10 is its own symbol, 100 is its own symbol, and 1000 is its own unique symbol. Now we're establishing that 0 pertains to only one number, or the lack thereof, and one number alone, and that is 0. And from the beginning of time, we've always had a concept of nothing. Because if you had nothing to eat that day, you had nothing to eat, right? So in our daily lives, our modern daily lives, the amount of times we use the actual number 0, it's pretty rare, right? Like, it's pretty damn rare that you actually use the number 0. So if you're doing anything, whether it's geometry, math, whatever, a 0 can represent the beginning, the start, the point, right? Like, the first dimension is a point. So if you're, let's say, doing geometry and you start somewhere, you don't have to necessarily designate where you started. You can do it with, if you wanted to, you could do it with a point, you can do it with a dash, you can do it with any symbol. And I believe they all had a very simple concept that they used for 0. It just wasn't that widespread. Like, why would you put 0 o'clock on the clock, right? Like, you wouldn't tell someone, oh, it's nothing o'clock. You get what I'm saying? So our number system is kind of getting in the way of us visualizing and thinking the way they did, and why they didn't have the number 0. And I'd like to add to that in the future, our concept of certain things will continue to change. And I'll give you a very realistic example. So all our lives, we were told that we live in 3D, right? The third dimension. Only in the last like 10, 15 years has it become mainstream that, no, we're actually in the fourth dimension, because time is also a dimension. This has just recently become knowledge across the board, right? Like, where the average everyday person understands they're in 4D because time exists. You're not only at a place, but you're also a place in time. Now, if you've ever played video games, you know something called 6-axis. So 3D is the X, Y, and Z axis, but the 6-axis starts with a point. And from that point, you can move up, down, left, right, forward, backward. Hence, 6-axis. Now, future generation, let's say 20 years from now, where they understand that, let's say 6-axis is the mainstream way of thinking. Some kid in class might raise their hand and say, I don't get it. Why did the older generation think they were living in a 3-dimensional space when they can move 6 different directions and everything in between? Right? They can kind of be stumped on the fact that, like, why would they call it 3D when they're moving in any 6 ways they choose, including the 7th time? So these concepts are going to change, right? Like, people that fly planes, they have to think about up and down. They have to think about left and right, forward, not that often backward, but even backward they have to think, right? So they're even running on a 6-axis system. You understand what I'm saying? They're not like, oh, I'm moving on the X, Y, and Z axis. And, well, is that front? I mean, is that left or right? Is that up or down, right? So as we humans evolve, so do certain ways of thinking. But that doesn't mean the old way of thinking was lacking or it wasn't up to par. It just meant they did things a little bit differently. And sometimes if you mix certain things up, like if you were to call 6-axis 3D in the future while you're referring to 6-axis, well, that's going to kind of mess things up for that generation that thinks you move 6 different directions, but you call it 3D. So that other 3D, like, what the hell were they using for that 3D, right? So, yeah, that's what I want to talk about. If you're intellectual out there, if you're a mathematician, if you're a historian, you want to correct me, you want to tell me your opinion, whatever it is, whoever you are, you can do as you please on my channel. I'm a firm believer that you can say whatever the fuck you want, and no one should be offended. I'm not offended. I'm not easily offended at all. So do as you please, say what you want. Yeah, peace. You guys have a good day. YOLO.